says we're going live, so maybe it's working. TJNet. TJNet.tv 9:32. We're a little late getting started. We had a crash here on the previous program. We had to reboot. So our bumper's running. We are recording. We are streaming. Let's cross our fingers. We have first-time guest number 285 standing by in our green room, and we are ready to count it down to Studio 8, starting now. Well, good evening and welcome. This is PJNet.tv. I'm Coach Prasick, and we just went through an episode in the last program. Fortunately, it was just as we were kind of winding down, and but my computer went berserk, and I had to reboot, and we have done so. And I'm going to try doing just one thing different to see if we can maintain sanity. But in any event, let's get underway. You came here to see first-time guest number 285, and I am so glad to welcome to the big screen Lynne Lanning, who comes to us from, oh gosh, I talked to so many people. What part of the country are you from, Lynne?
Lexington, North Carolina.
North Carolina, that's God's country. So we've covered it tonight. Pittsburgh, North Carolina, and me, I'm stuck down here in Florida. But Lynne, you have had a fascinating journey as of recent. But let's start with this. I believe the Blue Ridge Mountain is attended by 600 people. Were you one of them?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Is it first time?
Yes.
Oh, well, please tell us. How was it?
It was wonderful. I was supposed to go last year, but I got so nervous about going that I canceled my reservation, because even though I feel secure about my writing, when I'm around a bunch of professionals, I'm not so secure about my writing anymore. So anyway, I went ahead and pushed myself and went this year, and I'm so glad I did. Every one of those people, I don't care how famous or how new to the business they were, they all were so down to earth and so helpful. And I came home with a stack of business cards from other Christian writers, and I can't wait to see what becomes of it.
So, if I heard you right, you were all set to go last year, and you chickened out.
I did.
Okay, all right. This year, you didn't. So, what happened? And on your way there, were you having second thoughts?
No, a lot of prayer had gone into it, and I had a few other people helping to pray about it, and it just, I feel like God intended for me to go, and now that I've been there, it's like I got such a blessing when I was there. And like I said, I met so many wonderful people, and everybody there was willing to help anybody they could. And it really meant a lot to me.
Now, have you been to other conferences?
No, that's my first one.
Your first writing conference is the granddaddy of them all. Okay. So what were your expectations going in, apart from the trepidations and fear and palpitations?
Well, I had hoped to meet some of these people, and I felt like I knew some of them through some of the Facebook groups that I've been involved with. And I started meeting people the night before the conference started. I wanted to go up a day early so I could kind of get my bearings and find out where all the buildings were and everything. Mm-hmm. And it was just a real relaxing atmosphere. Everybody was laid back and friendly and sat around in rocking chairs and talked to each other like they had known each other for years. And most of them had just met, which that something about this year that they said is different than any other year. There were more first-time people there this year than there were people that had been there before. Um, Out of the 600 people, I would say about two-thirds of the people stood up when they said, "Who's been here? Who's
Really?
here for the first time?" And I think about two-thirds of the people stood up.
So y'all are gonna have to have like a class reunion. You know, the first time, the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writer Conference class of 2022 initiated, and now we'll get into some of the things. I don't want to spill the beans, but I take it that you've been a writer all your life, right? No.
No, I dabbled in it when I was in high school, and then again when I was a young mother. But I didn't really get serious about it until uh, like the last 3 years.
Mm. And what turned the corner for you? Was there a pivot point?
Yes, there was. There was a story that had been burning in my heart and in my mind for a very long time, and it was the story of my grandmother. And my first fiction novel was about her life as a little girl. Her mom had died in childbirth when she was 9 years old, and her dad had diabetes. And during that time, they didn't have any insulin or anything. It was more or less a death sentence. And
Mm.
so within that year between the death of her mom and her dad, he went around and found homes for all eight of his children. And so I wanted to write the story of how devastating it would be to a child to lose her whole family because all of the siblings went to different homes. And the experience and the death of her mom and the baby that she delivered, and then her having to leave her home, the only home she knew, all of her brothers and sisters. And then the next time she saw her dad was actually at his funeral. And I I like to have people accept personal responsibility. And a lot of people nowadays use excuses for
Hmm.
their behavior or for somebody else's behavior because, oh, they've been through such a rough life,
Yeah, their
and
potty training was bad or something. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, somebody
And
called them a bad name.
right.
Yeah.
And I thought if anybody had reason to have a chip on her shoulder or be bitter about anything, it would be my grandmother. And she didn't. In fact, I wrote a couple of notes here, and it said instead of allowing her circumstances to make her bitter and mean spirited, she turned her circumstances over to God, allowing Him to make her one of the sweetest, most humble women I've ever known. She spent her whole life serving God and others, always putting herself last. And we lost her in 2012, but she's still in our hearts, always will be, because she made that much of a impression on everybody that met her.
I have a similar story, Lynn. There's a lady she was actually a good friend of my mother's, but if you met this woman, she radiated a joy and a countenance. She was a strong woman. You would assume that she just had everything together. I won't go into all the details, but this woman was struck with tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. I mean, her husband of many years, who used to play golf with my father every Saturday morning, one Saturday, he wasn't there. He had run off with a woman half his age. Just turned his back on everything. She was devastated. Later, she remarried, and the man she married was an outdoorsman, and he didn't come home from a canoe trip, And the next day they found he had had a heart attack deep in the woods and died. Devastating.
Mm.
And I remember well on a Wednesday night worship service, right in the middle of the service, some law enforcement officers burst into the back, disrupted the service, and got Mrs. Ayler and escorted her out. Now, so of course, I mean, it was a pretty big deal. Well, she wasn't being arrested. Her daughter had been in a terrible car accident. And to this day, her daughter is a vegetable. She's in a nursing care facility, has never been able to do anything for herself since then. But if you met Weta Ayler, you would know that there was a point in my own life that I did call her up. And I said, whatever it is you've got, I want. And I love to hear your story, Lynn, because I am really sick and tired of these whiny babies, this generation of whiners that we've got that are offended by everything, that are a victim of everything. And you're right. They have no idea what hell on earth is. They don't know. And because of it, they'll never be strong like your grandmother. Or until they face those tragedies, those hard lessons, you'll never be strong. You're never tested. And the thing is each of those young people that I seem to have such contempt for, I actually love and care about. Because I know that in their heart they do have that strength. But until somebody until somebody forces them to accept responsibility, we can certainly let the situation impact us, but somewhere you got to turn that around and impact the situation. Yeah. And that strength, the strength to do that, can only be found, in the Lord. I don't know how people manage without Him. Well, you've heard my story. Now, listen, we kind of struggled, folks. Lynn has some books she's written, and I do want to talk about them. I want to spend a little more time than we usually do, because the sequence of events here, we're debating how to do it. We were going to start. We're going to actually do the first last, but there's a reason, because the last. It turns out you had to write some other books to build up to it or something. Tell us what happened here.
Okay. I started writing a series, and it's called Darnell Farms. And the more I got to writing, it was like, man, the backstory is where all the action is. That was where all the trauma and the devastation and young romance, another young romance was. And I thought, that's where the story is. So I actually finished 3 books in the series, and then decided to go back and write a 2-book prequel. So now I've got what used to be book number 1 in the series is now book number 3, and I've got it ready to be published while I'm finishing up the 2 prequel books, which are now books 1 and 2. Have I thoroughly confused everybody?
Well, it's a web to untangle, but it's an interesting story, because you had it in your head, in your mind's eye, pretty clear on book 3. But your mind's eye has the benefit of the experiences that you've lived through and knowing the characters in their development, where the reader doesn't have that advantage.
Right.
So you literally had to go write 2 prequels. And I think one of them is what we have on the screen. Am I correct? Promises of Love?
Yes. That's the first prequel, which is now book number 1. And you can actually start the series with book number 3 and get plenty of the backstory, but to actually feel the emotions of these people, it's like you need to be there during the backstory. But Promises of Love is the first prequel, and it is now book number 1.
Now, did you have book number 3 done and in the bag, and then had to go write 1 and 2, or did it, during the process of writing it, did it dawn on you, wait a minute, I need to put this on hold?
Well, it happens that I had to put the first of the series, which is number three, and it's called Seasons of Change. Because I had entered it in a contest with a competition with the Christian writers, the Blue Ridge Christian writers. Um, I couldn't have it published during the time that it was being judged until the winners were announced. And so I thought, well, okay, I've got a few months here. What am I going to do? Uh, and I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll write the prequel because that's where um, I write historic romantic suspense. And this story um, actually takes place, um, it starts right before the Civil War. And book two, the second prequel, is actually right in the Civil War. And it doesn't have quite as much romance because, for one thing, most of the men were
The men are
off.
gone, yeah, or
Uh,
dead.
yeah, and it was a lot of devastation. But even though my readers, they like to read the romance, most of them that have that have read the advanced copy of this, they stuck with me through it because um, they could relate to some of the characters' devastations, and it's not like a fairy tale. I did a lot of research and tried to write as accurately as possible. And a couple of things about my books. And like I said, they're not fairy tales. They're things that have happened to people in the past, and there's a lot of family issues, moral issues that uh, they're. I go by the Bible and teach how they should respond, um, and the Bible doesn't change.
Hmm.
And I always try to include the plan of salvation in my series somewhere several times. And I feel like that's what God intended for me to do. I'm not real good with speaking, and I'm scared that I might mislead somebody on in a one-on-one conversation. I might say the wrong word. Well,
Hmm.
when I'm typing it, thank goodness for that delete button and
Right, you can
backspace
edit.
and everything.
Yeah.
And I actually was able to lead a woman to the Lord that lives in New Zealand. She was reading my first series, book one, the one that was actually about my grandmother. And she contacted me through Facebook and told me that she wanted to get saved. And I led her to the Lord over Facebook while she was reading my first book. And that was worth all the bestseller list in the world.
Well, and yes, it's almost like it all becomes worth it if nothing further happened. And I think, well, something further did happen. Uh, your first time at Blue Ridge, you actually take an award away for a book that's not published. Now, how in the world did you manage to do that?
It was God. He was encouraging me to keep on, letting me know that I was on the right track. Um, it was called the Foundation Awards, and it was only for unpublished works, and all they wanted was the first 15 pages to see if, well, they were judging the first 15 pages to
Hmm.
see if it was good enough to continue with, and apparently it was, and I won second place for the Foundation Awards. I
Never
was
been to another conference. First conference, you take away a second place award for a book that has not even been published. Now, we have that book on the screen, Seasons of Change. Now, I also put your website on the screen, lynnlanning.com, because I love doing this, but one of the challenges is that no matter how much time we spend on a program, there's just not time to get to everything. So if you go to lynnlanning.com, From there, you can probably connect on Facebook and all kind of other whatever. But folks, we encourage you to do that. Get to know Lynne. Lynne, thank you. Congratulations that not only on the award, but it's a great testimony. It's a good thing to know, because so often the work we do, we don't know this side of heaven. Is this doing any good? This is my ministry. Am I being effective for the kingdom here? Where you know.
At least once.
At least one, okay? And of course, there may be legions of others. How in the world would we know this side of heaven? But I think God just kind of opened up the windows of heaven and just kind of let that blessing fall down on you. And I've never, must have been very rewarding. But, Lynne, thank you for engaging in a ministry, and thank you for including God's word even in your fictional work. A lot of fiction that is authored by Christians is, it's certainly void of any sewage, and it's clean, it's wholesome, but it's kind of it takes effort to weave in the gospel message intentionally, and you've done that, and it's already paid off already that we know of. What a testimony! And we appreciate you coming and just sharing your experience with us, and your life and your stories. And we hope that God continues to bless your work as He is already doing. And we would welcome you back anytime. Thanks for sharing your story, Lynne.
Well, thank you so much.
All righty. Lynne Lanning here on pjnet.tv. Well, this is about the point we were at the previous program when my computer went crazy. So, fortunately, this wraps it up for me this week. On Friday nights, I get the night off, and Steve Hazard joins us, and he starts at 9 p.m. Eastern with some retro music and some jazz, but that's just the build-up. That's just the warm-up to the 10 o'clock episode of My Perspective and Comment that he brings us each week. And it's become quite popular, and I hope that if you can, you will join myself and other PJNet family members to enjoy Steve Hazard. I appreciate him giving me the night off, and I bet you do too. So before I leave, I want to challenge you with 2 questions. You only have to answer yourself, but do answer yourself candidly. Here's the first question. What is the boldest thing that you've ever done for Jesus Christ? The second question, when was that? And the challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.